Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for being back here again with us. AmeriCorps is an example of yet one other instance where there is no constitutional justification for the federal government be confiscating taxpayer resources and applying it in the most inefficient, unproductive way possible. That's just another example of money we don't have, doing something that we shouldn't be doing with forced confiscation of federal tax dollars. Mr. Ravis, thanks for being here. In your testimony, you mentioned that the National Service Trust Fund had a negative $62 million balance at the end of the fiscal year due to an inability to understand and apply basic accounting practices. In March of this year, just some 8-9 months ago, Congress passed a rescission of appropriations to the trust fund. As you know, that is this trust fund that's managed by AmeriCorps. But 6 months later, the rescission had not yet happened. But an AmeriCorps rep from the trust fund office reviewed the account with the Department of Treasury and still authorized a major purchase of federal securities. That purchase was on September 26, just 75 or so days ago, or 6 months after the rescission. But a few days later, the funds the law required to be rescinded were finally taken back, leaving the account with the $62 million negative balance on September 30. Sir, how can a federal agency spend money that Congress didn't give it?
Thank you for the question. We are still looking into this. We only found out about this at the end of October. What we can tell you is only what the agency has told us at this point, and that is that there was a negative fund balance in the trust at the end of fiscal year 2024. But our initial assessment is that this is a result of the lack of internal controls for financial management.
So what level of confidence would you have that the supposed reforms that have been talked about here today will work as they're intended?
Well, this area, financial reporting, is one of the areas the agency indicated where they have remediated the material weakness. They just have not yet implemented it. So time will tell, hopefully in 2025, for the 2025 audit, whether it...
This might be the audit. This might be the one, if that's what you're saying, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Yeah, hope springs eternal, I guess. Mr. Smith, you didn't mention this in your testimony, but the negative number in the account indicates there was a likely violation of the Anti-Deficiency Act, which, as you know, prohibits an agency from spending more money than Congress appropriates. Why should we conclude anything other than the fact that the trust violated the Anti-Deficiency Act?
Mr. Good, thank you for your question. Our Office of General Counsel just completed a review of this challenge and found that there was no ADA violation. Let me explain. So our National Service Trust is the...
Okay, so you're saying there was an illegal violation, but at a minimum, this is horrible management of taxpayer funds. When will there be any accountability for the representative from AmeriCorps and the National Service Trust who facilitated this negative $62 million balance? Will there be any accountability for what took place?
There is accountability. There was always more than $1 billion in our National Service Trust account. There was one sub-account for 2.5 days that had a negative balance, but we were never in a position of not having enough money in order to pay our National Service Trust obligations.
Well, I appreciate your testimony, but do you think there should be any limit, and Mr. Ravis mentioned the next audit, should there be any limit on how many audits that AmeriCorps can fail before Congress eliminates the funding?
Mr. Good, I can't speak to what happened before I came here, but
You've had how many since you've got there? How many failed audits since you've been there?
So there were 5 years of failed disclaimed audit.
Right, and how many since you got there?
And we've had 3, and we've
Three
made
failed.
historic
So
investments
okay,
to
so
do something about
one's a concern, two's a real. I mean, three's a. When does it become a real problem under your watch, or when does it indicate that AmeriCorps is beyond salvation, if you will?
Mr. Good, I would say every single day AmeriCorps is delivering for the American people in extraordinary ways. I would also say, sitting with me today is Irv Dennis, who is our Senior Advisor for Financial Reform, who was the CFO under Secretary Carson, who turned around HUD, who had significantly more issues. It took HUD 4 to 5 years in order
So, hey, they failed even worse than AmeriCorps is what you're saying. Their failure was even worse, is that what you're saying?
Exponentially more, and Irv turned them around, literally wrote the book on how it done, which is why I hired him to help us, and
well,
we now have a plan.
It seems basic and fundamental, that we wouldn't keep giving money to an organization that continues to fail audits. You would only do this in the federal government. You wouldn't do this with a charitable organization. You wouldn't keep giving it money. But this is borrowed money from the taxpayers. We don't have the money. Every dollar dollar that's borrowed and spent by the federal government is either an increased tax on the citizens, or it's greater inflation that everybody's been suffering under because of this overspending, or it's increased debt that jeopardizes our future, and it's hurting the American people, and there's no constitutional justification for it, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize my colleague from California.